In this tutorial, I'm going to show you various ways to retrieve data from database. I have a project. Inside it, there is a class person with field ID, name, department, salary, and the associated entity address. In address class, there is ID, city, and state fields, and the overridden toString method to sys out the details of address and person instance. At the mapping end, in HBM file, I use many-to-one association to address with unique set to true that make this logically a one-to-one. At the database end, I have two tables, person and address. In person table, there are three entries with ID 1, 3, 4 and a foreign key column address referring to primary key of address table. In address, there are four entries with ID 1, 2, 3 and 5. At the client end, I will try to retrieve the row. First, I'm gonna use the get method which require ID as an argument and return a single row. Typecasting is required. Let me put some sysout which will help us to check the reaction of Hibernate with various commands. Sysout printing data, and before get put sysout retrieving data from database, and at last print the retrieve person. As person has associated address object, let's sysout that also. For that we have to use person.getAddress method to get the associated address. Okay, all done. Let's debug and check out the result. With get, the query is fired and the person is retrieved successfully. The details of associated entity can also be requested by Hibernate when associated details is accessed by client. Now in place of get, let's use load. Check the sysout, the output retrieved data, the query and the print data are in sequence. Let's execute it for load, which returns proxy. See, after retrieving data, no query is fired for load. But when we try to access the person details to print, the query is fired and data is retrieved. And of course, the associated address details is retrieved lazily. Now let's check the same in debug mode. Okay, when we call load on session, nothing happened, but as and when I try to access the person detail in debug window, query is fired. Till now we were using the default behavior of lazy loading for associated entity. What if we want the complete details to be retrieved together? Well, set the lazy attribute to false in mapping file. Okay, executing it once again. As you can see, both the queries for person and the associated address are fired together, and the associated address details are printed successfully with the query at that point. Get and load are easy and good if you want to retrieve single row. What if you want to retrieve more than one rows? Next, I'm gonna show you how the rows can be retrieved by using criteria. First, I'm gonna create the criteria by using session.createCriteria method. It will result in the creation of query like select star from person, which can result in list of rows. To fire the created query, use criteria.list method. I'm gonna iterate over the list and print the retrieved person. Let me change the mapping from associated entity to lazy once again. Executing the client. Okay, you can see we are able to retrieve all the persons. Let's retrieve the person having salary. For that, we need to first create criterion that are like restriction in where conditions. To create criterion, I have to use the restriction class and use the equal method of it. Once we have a condition, we can add it to criteria. Executing it once again. We can see only the rows with salary 20 lakhs is retrieved. We can also do the same thing in one line, like this. Okay, some unchecked warnings. Let me suppress warnings. Okay, done. Now I'm gonna add one more restrictions. Retrieve rows where department gonna be IT. And I'm very sure this will result in a single row. Then I can change from list to unique result. And of course, we have to typecast the retrieved result. Now I can directly say sysout person. Executing it once again. You can see it result in a single row. Many times there is a requirement to populate the retrieve row to some non-managed class object. Let's see how to do that. For that, I'm gonna create non-managed person class with property ID, name and salary. Next, as I have to retrieve only 3 columns data, not all the columns, I have to create the projection list. Projection is somewhat like specifying columns as select ID, name and salary from person. We will create the projection and we'll give the alias to the name of columns. That's gonna be the field name of the non-managed class. We're gonna project ID, name and salary. Once projection list is created, add it to the criteria by using set projection call. This time we want the row to be mapped to non-managed person class. The created query can result in more than one row. So we have to use list of non-managed person and call the list on criteria instance. Also to map to non-managed person, we have to transform the result using alias to being transformed and specify the bean to which the result to be transformed, that is non-managed person class. No need to typecast as gonna result the list. Okay, all done. Next I'm gonna iterate over the retrieve list of person and display data of each. Executing it once again. Okay, working fine. Next I'm gonna show you how to query the database by example. Can be helpful in a situation where you have partial information for user and want to retrieve the user with the available details. First, we create an instance of person class and fill it partially with the available details. The salary to in database we have two rows. Now I will try to retrieve the user. For that, we use the example class create method and pass the partially populated instance of person to it. We know there are two rows with the entry in a salary column, so the result from database is gonna be list of rows. Next, we use the session object to create the criteria and add the example to it and execute the criteria by using list method of it. Once again, use for each loop to iterate over retrieve rows and sys out each of them. Executing it. Okay, we are able to retrieve rows by using example. Now let's see how to use SQL to retrieve data from the database. For that, just call the create query method on session object and pass the SQL query to it. Here we are trying to retrieve all the rows, somewhat like select star from person. Executing it. Okay, working fine. Let's put where condition in it and test it with both positional parameter and name based parameter. First with positional based. All you need to do is at the parameter position in query put question mark and use the set string or set double or set integer accordingly to set the parameter by passing the position and the parameter value to it. Executing it. Okay, working fine. Let's test it with name based. Put colon salary in the query and use the set parameter method with the name of the parameter and the value to set. To avoid any confusion, I'm changing the name of it to salary parameter. Hibernate also provides the way by which we can externalize the query in the mapping file. In the mapping file, I'm gonna use the query element and give a name to it, get person by salary. To prevent the scan of query, we put it in C data section and put the query inside it. Now we're gonna refer the name in the code to access the query. For that, we use the get name query method on session object and pass the name of query to it. To execute the query, I'm gonna call the list method. But before that, even I need to set the name parameter city. Let's set it to Gwalior. Done. Executing it once again. Working fine. Okay. Let me modify it to display the address too. Okay, done. Executing it. Yes, you can see the address is Gwalior. Now we are at the last resort to retrieve the data using native SQL query. Not a big deal. Just call the create SQL query method on session object and pass the SQL query to it. Select star from person. To execute the query, I'm gonna call list on it, but the return type of the row is array of values. To iterate the list of array, use for each loop and each return object, I will assign it to array of objects and then I will again iterate it over the array to retrieve each element in array. Okay, done. Executing it. It's working fine.